Hey, it's Ray from Sober Without God, and here we are. It's Book Review Saturday, and we are on Stone Barrington book number 5 from the Stuart Woods collection. And this book is Worst Fears Realized. And if you've been here before on Book Review Saturday, I am reading a series of Stuart Woods books, and this is number 5 in the Stone Barrington series, and it was published in 1999. So I'm going through a series of books that were written a while back. And I find them fascinating just because of the main character. And if you've heard me talk about Stone Barrington before, he is an ex-cop turned into a lawyer, now kind of a private investigator. You're kind of a Dollar General type of James Bond who makes more money, eats in better restaurants, and stays in better hotels than you, and lives an expensive lifestyle, flies his own jet, drives a Mercedes that is souped up to the nth degree, and he's just better than you. That's all there is to it. And the second he's in a room alone with a woman, he's going to sleep with her. He's a dog. And the story's good. It's a page turner usually. Stuart Woods really doesn't tie the story together well at the end. It just kind of ends and leads you on to the next book. The last book didn't do that. This book kind of gets you to the end and doesn't resolve it very well, but it's a pretty good book. Worst Fears Realized. They mention the title of the book twice in the book, and they say Worst Fears Realized twice, just to let you know that that's the name of the book. But Stone Barrington in this book finds himself in the middle of, he's going, first of all, I'll tell you this. If by chapter 13, Stone Barrington is not sleeping with the woman, something's wrong. In fact, that seems to be the magical formula in Stuart Woods novels. Stone Barrington is doing it by chapter 13. But in the first chapter of this book, he's on his way to being in bed with a woman. And in fact, he's on his way up to her apartment. And she's like, why don't you go for some Chinese takeout and pick it up? And then we'll mess around after. And he's like, okay, I'll go pick up the Chinese takeout. And in the 5 minutes he goes and he comes back and she's dead. And that's how the book starts. And he's implicated in her death eventually. But it turns out to be someone they suspect that he and his old partner Dino might have arrested some time ago. And it's really a series of serial killings, but they never call it serial killings. Now, my understanding is if it's 3 or more, then it's usually a set of serial killings, but they never say the word serial killings. So Stone makes his way through his 2 women in this book, and he meets up with an old friend, and they hang out for a while, and this woman he knows from England, and she flies in and buys him furniture for his new country house out in Connecticut, and they meet up for a while, and then she's like, it's too violent here, and after she buys him furniture, she leaves and goes back home, and that romance dies. And then after that, he gets a tie-in with a new woman who is tied to the mob, of course, because there's always mobsters in Stuart Woods books, but here in Worst Fears Realized, he meets the main mobster, I think, who will have ties throughout a lot of the Stone Barrington novels. But so he and his partner go on the chase through people who seem to have it in for him and his partner, and they're killing people close to them. And they witness a murder, and then people around them are murdered or threatened, and they are on the hunt for this serial killer who's not called a serial killer. And the police department aren't taking it seriously for some reason, even though there's a chain of murders who are linked once in a while. And there are some very interesting, of course, like always, moral dilemmas in these books. And they're questioning Stone Barrington about this woman in chapter 1 who he was about to sleep with. And the DA's office comes down, and they're like, hey, Mr. Barrington, did you know that you knew Mrs. Bean? And he said, well, we met that night at a party and we went home together. I'm just telling you, if you're a female, don't be alone in the room with Stone Barrington because you will be seduced immediately. I guess it's just Stone Barrington. That's just who he is. Anyway, and they're like, yes, you met her several years ago at a restaurant that you frequent called Elaine's, and you went home together. And he's like, I don't remember that, dog. And so he's like, I can't remember everybody I slept with. Of course, you can't, Magic Johnson. And then later on, when he hooks up with this lady who is daughter of a mob boss who he's been warned about, who might be a little bit on the irrational side, and he shouldn't mess around with her because she's still technically married. Just remember that. She's still technically married to this guy who's absolutely off his rocker and madly jealous about her, and the divorce isn't final. He says he starts getting involved with her and she pursues him, and they start getting down and dirty into it. And he says Stone paid up. For a moment, he wondered what he was getting himself into. Then he stopped worrying about it. Yes, that is Mr. I don't have a moral compass, Stone Barrington. But at some point, we do realize that Stone Barrington, I have mentioned that Stone Barrington does not have a moral compass. In fact, I've said that Stone Barrington, if you use his moral compass to point north and get you to Canada, you would probably end up on Neptune. Well, maybe I was a little bit wrong about that because Stone Barrington meets back up with his old girlfriend, Arrington, from previous novels, and she's married and has a kid with her Hollywood boyfriend. And she shows up at his house and she's like, Stone, I really want to be with you, even though I have a baby and the sexiest movie star in the world, but it's you I want to be with. And I've only been married 3 months, but it's you I want to be with. And I'll leave the movie star and I'll leave the baby with him and I'll be with you. Anyway, this is what Stone Barrington says in response to that as she tries to seduce Stone in his own home. Stone took her shoulders and held her away from him. Listen to me, he said. I've done things in my life I'm not proud of. Like, for instance, sleeping with a woman in a couple of books ago who had just lost her husband 2 days before, or treating women like they're a hunk of meat and when he gets tired of them, passing them along to other men within a span of 24 hours. Stuff like that. Stuff I'm not proud of. I've done things in my life I'm not proud of, but I've never been an adulterer, and I'm not going to start now, not even with you, in spite of the fact that I've loved you more than any woman I've ever known. I just can't do it. Oh, see? His moral compass. Tap on it a little bit. Maybe it'll point north just for a moment. But then, I was, of course, in my head, I'm like, okay, it's book 5. There's like 60 of these books. So are we just setting poor Stone up for failure? But he's already, like the mob lady, she's already technically married still. Well, guess who shows up at his door while he's with the mob lady? Her guy, who she's still technically married to. And he comes knocking on the door, the guy that she's still technically married to. And he comes to the door and he says, my name is John Donato. Does that mean anything to you? And I don't think so, Stone said. Then just as the man spoke, he remembered. Funny, it ought to, since you've been screwing my wife. Poor Stone. So misunderstood. Anyway, once again, the book is filled with action, thrilling suspense, murders, fun, a serial killer who's not a serial killer, changed identities, twists and turns. Definitely deserves, I don't know, 3.5 Stone Barringtons out of 5. But it was a pretty good read. And it says on the back that you could read it in one sitting. I don't know if you could read it in one sitting. I guess if you didn't have to go to the bathroom and you didn't drink any water or have to eat for a solid 12 hours, you probably get through it in one sitting. Took me a couple days, but I would do work for a living. So next on the list is LA Dead, which I'm going to start listening to with an audiobook. And I'm also going to go back to the printed copy as well. So I hope to see you next time as I review LA Dead. And I hope you have a wonderful